All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors, excuse me, for this morning. Sure to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar Beis, the Schwartzbaum family, for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this month in memory of Rabbi Aaron Schwartzbaum, Aaron Yosef ben Meir Zichron Livracha. Lay a soul in the schus of her daughter Ilana Bas Esther's successful surgery, complete refuah shalema, and a safe return of all of our hostages and success for all of our soldiers. Maya Hoffman in memory of her father Reuven ben Emmanuel, and in the merit of Hatzlacha, health and joy for her entire family. Yoel and Sarah Kelman in honor of the birth of their son, and in memory of Staff Sergeant David Sasuna Shemi Kom Damo. We also dedicate our learning Le'ilui Nishmas, soldiers who have fallen in battle, Nadav Cohen and Sivan Weil. We hope that their neshamas will have an aliyah. We hope that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give all of our soldiers tremendous hatzlacha, bring all of our hostages home, b'shalom and b'karov. But with that, let us begin. We have an incredible daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Lamed Gimel 33, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Lamed Beis Amud Beis 32b, and I believe, if I remember correctly, we left off at Tashma, right? So we'll say, so that is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 lines up from the bottom. Technically speaking, last word on the 13th line up from the bottom, but let's just pick up 12 lines of Tashma. So we'll say, so remember again, we are in the midst of a raging dispute. What is a raging dispute? It's so raging that you forgot about it, right? And so a raging dispute is, Tsar Ba'alei Chayim. So the question is the concept of, see, remember, I mentioned this yesterday, Tsar Ba'alei Chayim has really two pieces. When we think about Tsar Ba'alei Chayim, we normally think about inflicting harm upon animals. The truth is, there's another part of Tsar Ba'alei Chayim, which is, I see an animal in distress, my obligation to remove or to alleviate or to address the distress of that animal. So that's the area of Tsar Ba'alei Chayim that we're focusing on now. So specifically, I'm walking, I go ahead and I see Reuven's animal struggling underneath its load. So I have an obligation, the Torah calls it the obligation ultimately of prika, of unloading the animal. And again, then there's the concept of ti'ina. Now remember, the way that the Torah phrases prika is azov ta'azov, and then ti'ina, the reloading of the animal, hakim takim. So the machlokes over here now is Tsar Ba'alei Chayim da'araisa, or is it d'Rabbanan? Now, so just to orient ourselves a little bit, if we go with the idea that Tsar Ba'alei Chayim is da'araisa, let's just go with this idea for just a second. What's the makar? In other words, in order for something to be a mitzvah da'araisa, generally, what do you need? A pasuk. So what's the pasuk that would say that Tsar Ba'alei Chayim is da'araisa? So again, the pasuk would be azov ta'azov. That would be the pasuk. In other words, that I'm walking along the road, I see my friend's animal struggling underneath its load. Excuse me, the Torah says, azov ta'azov. Why is there an obligation? Eitan, are you drinking soda at 5:45? Okay, I just want to make sure. Seltzer, all right, good. He's about to call his mother. I got nervous for a second. All right, good. So this is what happens when fathers have their kids early in the morning. You know, you never know what's going to happen. So remember again. So the pasuk that would be a mitzvah sasei d'oraisa would be azov ta'azov. I just want to point that out. The Gemara never explicitly mentioned that point, but actually Andre came over to me yesterday after the shir. Is like the Gemara is saying that there's a mitzvah d'oraisa, but what's the pasuk? What's the pasuk that's being quoted? So that would be the makar for this. Okay, so now let's continue. Tashma, peimas ovid kochav masa Yisrael. Interesting case over here. Let's say you have an animal belonging to a non-Jew, but it's carrying the load of a Jew. Okay, so the Gemara says, v'chadalta, you don't have an obligation to help out. All right, interesting, right? So in other words, the animal belongs to the non-Jew, the merchandise belongs to the Jew, the animal is struggling underneath its load, I don't have an obligation to help out. Verse 1 second. Now 1 second, we spoke this yesterday. If Tsar Ba'alei Chayim is d'oraisa, then what? It doesn't matter who owns the animal. In other words, Jewish ownership, non-Jewish ownership. We'll say, remember again, this is not a din in the religious status or personal piety of the animal, right? This is an idea that there's an obligation to alleviate animal suffering. Who cares? By the way, I'll take it a step further. They would also apply to an animal of hefker. even if no one owned the animal, right? So obviously this must mean that Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is not D'Oraisa, to which the Gemara says, no. The Olam, Tzar Ba'alei Chaim D'Oraisa. In reality, Tzar Ba'alei Chaim is D'Oraisa. Hasam B'Ti'ina. Both say that's talking about a case of reloading the animal, right? Remember again, both say, by reloading, there's no Tzar Ba'alei Chaim, right? So therefore, the saying over here is, if you have the animal of a non-Jew with merchandise of a Jew, I'm not obligated to help the non-Jew reload his donkey. Or I'm using donkey as the example. So Gemara says, if that's the case, Ema Seifa, look at the end of that price. What happens if you have the animal of a Jew and masui and merchandise of a non-Jew, azov tazov? You should help. So the Gemara says, one second, v'ibetina amai azov tazov. But again, at the end of the day, if lamaisa talking about reloading the animal, why do I have an obligation to help reload? To which the Gemara says, mishum tzara di Yisrael, because of the tzara of the Jew. Since the Jew ultimately, it's the Jewish donkey, right? The Jew owns the donkey, and he's responsible for transporting the merchandise. If he doesn't get help in reloading his donkey, he's going to be upset. So step in order to alleviate a Jew's upsetness. If that's the case, I feel Reishanami. So Rabbi say, if that's the case, that I don't want a Jew to be in distress, so I should have to step in the first case also. Because what's the first case? Jewish merchandise, non-Jewish donkey. So I say, so again, if no one's there, if I don't step in to help reload the donkey, isn't the Jew going to be upset as well? Reisha b'chamra oved kochavim, seifa b'chamra Yisrael. We'll say the Reisha is talking about where the donkey driver is not Jewish, and the second part is talking about where the donkey driver is Jewish. So therefore, again, in a case where the donkey driver is not Jewish, and even though the merchandise is Jewish, I don't have an obligation to go ahead and step in to help with ti'ina. When the merchandise is non-Jewish, but the donkey driver is Jewish, I have an obligation to step in for ti'ina in order to alleviate any Jewish distress. So the Gemara says, my pascha. So we'll say, so here's what's interesting. What the Gemara is presupposing is, if the Jew is owned by a donkey, no, that didn't come out right? If the donkey is owned by the Jew, right, then that must mean that the donkey driver is Jewish. And if the donkey is owned by the non-Jew, that must mean that the donkey driver is not Jewish. So the Gemara said, my pascha, why do you make that assumption? It's very simple. Stama de milsa, inish basar chamre azil. We'll say the assumption is that the owner of the donkey is going to be the one who's leading it. So therefore, again, I will say, in a case where you have a non-Jewish donkey, Bepashtos is going to be the non-Jewish owner who's there. And therefore, again, when it comes to ti'ina, I don't have an obligation to step in there, even if it's Jewish merchandise. When it's a Jewish donkey owner, the assumption is it is the Jew who is leading the donkey, and therefore for ti'ina purposes, I have an obligation to go ahead and step in and help out even with non-Jewish merchandise. Okay, I will say, now I'll point out, by the way, in that line, it's a very profound line over here as well. Stama de milsa, I will say the way the world works is inish basar chamre azal. I will say, a person generally tends to follow his chumrius. Chumrius also means my material side. I will say that at the end of the day, people are very impacted by their gashmius, by their chumrius. And this, by the way, is not a condemnation, it's a reality. The reality is, for most of us in life, in order for my ruchnius, in order for me to work on my ruchnius, I have to know that my gashmius is in order. This is why, in general, if you look at the beginning, let's say, for example, Parshas Bechukosai, right, the Torah says, "Im bechukosai tilechu mitzvasai tishmoru." Kadosh Baruch Hu says, if you follow in my ways, listen to my Torah. So it's interesting. The Torah then outlines a whole bunch of material rewards. And it's interesting, right? Because here, the Torah seems to be saying, if you go out and you follow HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so you'll get material rewards. What's the pshat? The pshat, I don't say, Or Chaim HaKadosh brings down. He says, not material rewards. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, I understand that in order for you to work on your ruchnius, in order for you to work on your spirituality, your material needs need to be met. It's the derech of man. Stama de milsa inish basar chamre azil. The general disposition is a person follows his gashmios. He follows his chumrios. If my gashmios, if I can pay my bills, right? And I'm able to take care of myself materially, then I have the bandwidth to focus on my spirituality. But without that material comfort or material, again, sometimes it's difficult to be able to know that I can focus on my ruchni. It's an incredible yisod. Let's go weiter. But I will say, but one second. But if the chadalta v'azov is also talking about prika, so the Gemara says, Hamani Rabbi Yosei Lili. Whose opinion is this? Rabbi Yosei Lili. The Amar Sar Bali Chayim Lav Doraisa. So Rabbi said the Gemara is suggesting whose opinion is being reflected over here? Rabbi Yosei Lili, who holds that Sar Bali Chayim is not Doraisa. Okay, so it's an incredible Gemara. Tashma. Ohev lifrok v'soni liton. Rabbi say an incredible Gemara. Let's say I have in front of me two donkeys. One donkey is owned by my friend. One donkey is owned by my enemy. My friend's donkey needs prika. My enemy's donkey needs te'ina. Now I will say, let's take a step back for just a second, right? So remember, in prika te'ina, which one is going to have the higher level of tsar b'alei chayim? Prika, right? Remember again, I want to just point out, there's really no tsar b'alei chayim in Te'ina. That's why, remember again, in the Mishnah, we even have an opinion that says that you can go ahead and halacha l'maisa charge money for Te'ina. Right? In other words, that I can say, I'm happy to help, but I'm going to get paid for that. So l'maisa, again, I was listen to this case. So two donkeys in front of me right now. My friend's donkey needs prika, so it's buckling underneath its load. My enemy's donkey needs te'ina, needs to be reloaded. So what do? So the Gemara says, mitzvah b'sonei, help out your enemy. Help out your enemy, right? In other words, help out your enemy with te'ina. Why? Kedei lakov es yitzro. We'll say, in order to go ahead and literally subdue your yetzer, or subjugate your yetzer. Meaning what I was saying, since in helping my enemy, I'm overcoming some internal obstacle within myself, right? I dislike a Jew. Which I will say is it's a capital crime. It's literally a capital crime to go ahead. I mean, not literally a capital crime, but you understand, metaphorically a capital crime to hate another Jew. So if I have the opportunity to overcome that hate, to overcome that animosity, then you take that. The Gemara says, 1 second. So we'll see now 1 second. If Tzar B'Alechaim is D'Oraisa, we'll say, then what? Then you have to help the animal. You have to help the animal of your friend with prika. With prika, that should take precedence. To which the Gemara says, "Afilu hachi." No, Tzar B'Alechaim is D'Oraisa. But even though Tzar B'Alechaim is D'Oraisa, Kedei Lokov es Yitzro Adif. Rabbi say there is no greater accomplishment in this world than the ability to overcome your Yetzer. Rabbi say, wow. So again, Rabbi say, even though Tzar B'Alechaim is D'Oraisa, and because Tzar B'Alechaim is D'Oraisa, therefore there should be an obligation to go ahead and help out my friend's donkey, because that's the one that's struggling underneath its load. Even with all that, there is nothing greater in this world than overcoming your Yetzer Hara. Rabbi say, do you hear this line of the Gemara? Kedei lakov es yitzro adif. Rabbi say, what that means is, when I struggle with something, and we all struggle with something, whether it's an aveira, whether it's a behavior. Now, not every negative behavior is necessarily an aveira, but all of us have certain behaviors which I know hold me back from self-actualization. The greatest accomplishment in life is when you overcome your yetzer. That is we'll say, but not only that, that's not new to us. What's new to us? That's even greater than fulfilling a mitzvah's asay d'oraisa. Isn't that incredible? Overcoming your yetzer is even greater than the fulfillment of a biblical precept. V'haraya, my friend's animal is struggling underneath its load. My enemy's animal needs to be reloaded. Reload your enemy's animal. But 1 second, but Tzar B'Alechaim is d'oraisa. So there's a mitzvah d'oraisa to help my friend, not my enemy. You're right. But by helping your enemy, you overcome your yetzer, and there is no greater accomplishment in this world than overcoming your desires for something that is not appropriate. Incredible, I will say. The hallmark of personalistic accomplishment is the ability to want something, to lust for something, to do something that is inappropriate, and then to overcome that desire. That is the pinnacle of personalistic accomplishment. Incredible. Tashma. Sonei sha'amru, sonei Yisrael, lo sonei ovdei kochavim. So, by the way, the Sonei that we're talking about is talking about a Jew that I don't like, but not a non-Jew. not a non-Jew. So 1 second. Now if you hold that halacha l'maisa, that tzar b'alechem is daraisa, what does it matter who the enemy is? So the Gemara says, Mi savrit asoni dekra kai, asoni demasnisin kai. No, the Gemara says, no, don't think we're talking about the enemy of the pasuk. Rather, we're just talking about prika. We're talking about the enemy of the brisa, which is talking about ti'ino. Okay, Tashma. Let's go back there. We'll say top of Lamed Gimel. 33a. We'll see some great cases here. Rovates velo raftzon. So again, we'll remember again. Lashon of the pasuk is I'm walking down the road and I see my friend's donkey. Rovates tachas masao. Now we'll say rovates means ultimately again that this is episodic. This is episodic. I see my friend's donkey struggling underneath its burden, velo raftzon, but not an animal that is like habitually struggling underneath its burden. The Gemara says, so rovates velo omed. Furthermore, I see the animal buckling and not standing up straight. Masa'o, I see it underneath its burden, velo mefurak. And we're not talking about ultimately again ti'ina. Now we'll say, now watch this, tachas masa'o, underneath its burden. The Gemara says, shiyachol lamod bo. We're talking about a burden that the animal is capable of holding. So we saw this in the Mishnah already, this opinion that says that if the owner of the animal overloaded the animal with a load that it's not really capable of shouldering and the animal is buckling underneath that, I don't have an obligation to step in. So the Gemara says, but 1 second. Mali rovates, mali raftzon, mali omed. So I'll say, so remember again, this doesn't make sense. If you hold, that's I'll say, it's almost like, if the scenario is like this, you help. If it's not like this, you don't help. I don't understand. If tzar b'alechem is deraisa bosai, then all of this is very simple, right? What's the halacha? You see a struggling animal, help. That's it. In other words, there's no qualifications. It's a habitual buckler. It's not habitual. It's an episodic buckler. It's a recreational buckler, right? Sometimes it's there. Sometimes it's this. Sometimes it's this. There's no qualifications. If tzar b'alechem is deraisa, if the animal is struggling, you step in and you help. So the Gemara says, "Haman Rabbi Yosef Lili." So you're right. This reflects another school of thought. It's Rabbi Yosef Lili. The Amar tzar b'alechem derabanan. Holds. So we'll say this. Remember again, we know this from yesterday's daf. This is a machlokas. It's tzar b'alechem d'Rabbanan, tzar b'alechem d'Oraisa. Rabbi Yosef holds it's d'Rabbanan. So more talking tzar, but this seems to be clear. Diktani tachas masao masui sheyachol lamod bo. Because also the Brisa said when the pasuk says you see your friend's donkey buckling underneath its burden. Maso means its burden. And Rabbi Yosef Lili Paskin, and the Brisa says it means a burden that the animal is capable of shouldering. Man shamas le de isle hai svara. So Rabbi say, who holds of this svara? That you're only obligated to step in and help out in a case where the animal is shouldering a burden that it is capable of holding. Rabbi Yossi Haglili, Shmamina. So I'll say, we saw this again. Remember in the Mishnah already, we saw this view ascribed to Rabbi Yossi Haglili. But how can you really say this up according to Rabbi Yossi Haglili? V'hakatani, but I will say, but we learned, v'hakatani seifa, tachas masa'o v'lo mefurak. You will say, when are you obligated to help? When the animal is struggling underneath its burden, but not when the burden is sitting next to the animal. They will say, now, what does that sound like? My love mefurak. So we'll say, so ultimately again, my love mefurak. So the Gemara says, my lo mefurak, ilema lo mefurak klal. So we'll say, if we say that it's talking about where the burden is not off the animal, so haksiv hakim takim imo. Then I will say that would be tina. Ela pshita lo mefurak bechinam ela bischar. Rather, I will say what it means is I'm not obligated to do te'ina for free, but I'm obligated to do te'ina, but I can ask for compensation. Man shamas le de isle hai sivara. So I will say, so ultimately again, who holds that you can ask for payment for te'ina? That's the Rabbanan. To which the Gemara says, you're right. The older Rabbi Yosef Lili, in reality, the Brisa reflected the view of Rabbi Yosef Lili. Ubeti'ina sarvala k'Rabbanan. But I will say, so again, Rabbi Yosef Lili is the opinion that says, Tachas masa'o means I'm only obligated to help out the animal, to help unload the animal, if the animal is holding a burden that it is capable of shouldering. If the owner overloaded it, I am not obligated to step in. That's Rabbi Yosef Halili. Rabbi Yosef Halili holds like the Rabbanon by Ti'ina, so he'll hold that by Prika, you're obligated to unload the animal for free, but by Ti'ina, you're obligated to step in, but you're also entitled to ask for compensation. Okay, fascinating. So Tan Rabbanon. So let's go weiter. Kisira, if you will see. So the Gemara says, Yachal afilu meirachok. So we'll say, by the way, what's the halacha? How do we paskin? We paskin tsar balei chayim is doraisa. That's how we paskin. And they both say, because we paskin tsar balei chayim doraisa, so therefore, again, all of these other qualifications don't really apply. So for argument's sake, I'm walking down the road, I see Ruvain's donkey buckling underneath its load, even if it's clear that Ruvain overloaded that donkey. So in other words, there's no way the donkey could. So in other words, once you hold this doraisa, both say, so then all of these other qualifications and all these cases kind of go out the window. But that is how we paskin. That's how the Rambam paskins. That ultimately, again, tsar balei chayim is doraisa. And again, I will say, now here's what's interesting. The Rambam doesn't tell you why it's doraisa. The Kesef Mishnah, and I will say this is in Parakud Gimel of Hilchos Rotseach Ushmiras Nefesh. So again, the Rambam, so the Kesef Mishnah quotes, and the Kesef Mishnah says that halacha l'maisa, we learn out from the pasuk of Azov Ta'azov Imo. That's the mucker. The fact that the Torah tells me that if I'm walking down the road and I see my friend's donkey rovetz tachas maso, buckling underneath its burden, Azov Ta'azov Imo, help out the animal. Why? Again, that's the mucker. That's the source that Tsar Balei Chayim is D'oraisa. Okay, beautiful. Tanrabanan, Kisira. So we'll say, so now some other qualifications in this halacha. Kisira, yachal afilu meirachok. So we'll say, so the lashon of the pasuk is, you will see, kisira chamor sonacha, rovetz tachas maso, vechadalta, me'azov lo azov tazovimo. Fine. So we'll say, the lashon of the pasuk is, you will see your friend's donkey struggling underneath its burden. So the Gemara says, you might have thought that you're obligated to, what happens, like most say, you have very good eyesight. So you see the donkey at a very far distance. You might have thought that you're obligated to help. Talmud Lomar kisifka. So we'll say, the pasuk says, kisifka. Now kisifka literally means you'll encounter. Now paga really is a lashon of like close encounter. So kisira could mean like a long distance. Kisifka, both the shonos over here, sounds like a very close encounter. So the Gemara says, "I kisifka yachal pigia mamish." So I'll say, if it would have said kisifka, you would have thought that means that what? That literally you're bumping into the animal. Talmud lomar kisira. Therefore, the pasuk says, when you will see ve'ezo hiriyah sheyesh papigia. Therefore, both say, when you take these two concepts together, essentially what it means is like this. Even though you're not mamish bumping into the animal, it's not a close encounter, but at the same time you're seeing it in a relatively close proximity. So what's a re'iyah? That's a pegia, right? What's seeing something that it's a relatively close proximity? Shi'uro chachamim echad mishava umechza b'mil. So we'll say Chazal estimated this literally at 2/15 of a mil. 2/15 of a mil. So I'll say, so just to give you an idea, 2/15 of a mil is 266 amos, which is approximately 500 feet. 500 feet. So if that animal is about, I'm sorry? Is that what it's from here to Smith Avenue? Yeah, okay, good. So I'll say, so 500 feet. So 500 feet, right? If you go ahead and you see that animal within a proximity of 500 feet, that's considered to be a re'iyah, that's a pigiyah. So I could see it and it's close enough that I should step in and help. So the Gemara says, Vizehu ris. The Gemara identifies this as the distance of a ris. Okay? So the Gemara says, Tana, umedad imo ad parsa. And I will say, this is a fascinating halacha that the Gemara is just introducing us to, which is that after you load up the animal, it's incredible, after you load up the animal, so we'll say up until now, we've always assumed that the mitzvah of, so there's prika, which we've been focusing on, and then there's ti'ina, right? A separate mitzvah to help reload the animal. We've always assumed that after you reload the animal, you're done. Now the Gemara says, by the way, there's an additional piece to the mitzvah, which is after you reload the animal, medad imo ad parsa. You have to go ahead and literally walk. Rashi says, medad imo la'achar shit ino shemiyach shaviyipol. After you reload the animal, you have to accompany the animal for a little while. Ad parsa. I'm about to say the truth is, a parsa is actually not such a little while. Parsa is 4 mil, which is approximately 8,000 amos. That's actually not an insignificant distance. You're obligated to walk alongside the animal. Amar Barbachana v'notel schar. But you're allowed to ask for payment for that. In other words, both say, so that is a big investment. So in other words, not only am I obligated to reload the animal, but what? You have to go and accompany it for a little while to make sure that it's steady now with its newly reloaded merchandise, right? But to be clear, both say, whereas we paskin that for te'ina, you can't ask for repayment, right? You can't ask for payment, right? For pre-cantino tremisos dies, so you don't ask for payment. But for accompanying the animal afterwards to make sure that it's steady on its feet, for that, ultimately, again, you get paid. And I remember again, I will say, how do you get paid? So that goes back to yesterday's daf, or Shabbos' daf, beginning of yesterday's daf, kipoel batal, right? So you don't necessarily get your full salary, you'll get like poel batal, like we discussed yesterday. I will say there's also a tremendous Moshe Haskell in this Gemara of medad de'imo ad parsa. I will say, the whole Rabbi Nachman has a beautiful Torah on this where he writes that the whole idea of these psukim of kisira chamor son acha rovetz tachas masao azov ta'azov lo. Rabbi Nachman also sees in these psukim an incredible metaphor to help out each other when we are struggling. That sometimes, you walk along the road of life and you see someone else struggling with their life load. And in life, it is so easy to say, you know what? I've got my own stuff going on. I don't have time. I don't have time for this. And the Torah says, Azov ta'azov imo. If you see another Yid struggling, you see someone else buckling underneath their pressures and underneath their difficulties of life, step in. Step in, I will say. And here's the incredible part. When do you step in? Don't wait until they fall down. Right? Don't wait until their legs give out from under them. Don't wait until they're literally lying on the ground underneath the weight of the load. As soon as you see them struggling, step in and help out. And I will say, so now what do you do when you help out? Sometimes you have to help a person unload their life baggage. And then what do you do afterwards? I will say, you help them reload. Because as we know, the way the baggage of life works is, rarely do you get to fully dispose of your life baggage. Just sometimes you have to unload it in order to reload it and keep going with it. There's some baggage, I will say, that is with us throughout all of life. It's just a question of how it's kind of like when, so you ever pack up your car, you have to pack up all the baggage, and you realize you pack up the car and you didn't pack it right. So what do you need to do? You have to take everything out and repack it again in a way that everything fits. Sometimes vacations are a wonderful metaphor for life, because I will say sometimes in life all the baggage has to come with you. You just have to figure out how to repack it in a way that allows you to travel forward. So Rabbi Nachman sees in this an incredible metaphor for how we help each other. But I will say this last piece is so profound. This last piece is, I will say sometimes in life we help people in moments of crisis and then we go away and then we disappear. It's important to know that sometimes when people need help most is not just in the reloading and getting up, but in taking the first initial steps forward in life. I'll give you just a simple mashal of this. We'll say no one has to explain to us the mitzvah and the importance of nichum avelim, right? Whether it's helping a minyan, right? Whether it's helping a minyan in a Beis Savel or just showing up to visit. We'll say sometimes the greatest chesed you could do for someone is calling them on the day after Shiva. Because I will say Shiva is an incredible experience where you're blanketed by love. People are coming, people are going, there's food, there's minyanim, there's this. I will say, you should just know that very often the feelings of loneliness when Shiva is over, right? After the chairs are picked up, the Aron Kodesh is gone, and often because everybody then goes on with life. Meanwhile, this person who just encountered loss now has to take new steps in a new reality, in a new life. And often that support system, that support network that was so there and so present for the last 7 days is not there. It's not intentionally, chas shalom, right? But people figured, okay, Shiv's over, let's go. We're on to the next thing. And meanwhile, again, so as a community, we help this person who just went ahead and encountered loss. We help them reload, so to speak. But now they're taking their first steps in this new life. And Rahman al sometimes you're taking it all alone. I would say it's a wonderful practice to think about that if you know someone who's sitting Shiva, of course be there during Shiva, but make sure to pick up the phone on the day that they get up, or on the day after they get up. Umedade imo ad parsa. We have to be there for each other. When you know that someone is taking a step in a new chapter, in a new tekufa of life, and maybe they're a little bit shaky on their feet, make sure to be there for them. Make sure to be there with them as they take those initial first steps. Incredible. Says the Mishnah. All right, Rabbi say, you thought it was good until now. Just wait. Says the Gemara, Avedasa v'avedas aviv. Both say, watch this. I lose an object and my father lost an object. What's the halacha? Avedasa kodemes. Ultimately, again, my avedas first. My avedas first. In other words, we'll say, we've seen this before. That in the same way that my physical life comes first, my material life comes first as well. We'll talk about this more in just a bit. Similarly, I lost an object, my Rebbe lost an object. I have a right to go ahead and find my object before my Rebbe's. We'll say, watch these Gemaras. Avedas ave v'avedas rabo. We'll say, what happens if my father lost an object and my Rebbe lost an object? Shel rabo kodemes. I have an obligation to find my Rebbe's object first. Why? Such a beautiful Gemara. Sha'aviv heviu la'olam hazeh, v'rabo shalom do chachma meviu l'chaya olam haba. Because my father is responsible for bringing me into this world, but my Rebbe who taught me wisdom. Now, we're going to have to see what that line means. My Rebbe who taught me wisdom brings me to the world to come. So Rabbi say, so an incredibly profound Gemara, and this sets up a halachic hierarchy. So the Rabbi say, therefore, again, when I have a conflict between the kavod between my Rebbe and the kavod between my father, the kavod to my Rebbe wins out, right? So this is. So therefore, again, my Rebbe lost an object, my father lost an object. I return now. Who is a Rebbe? We'll have to see in the Gemara. Like, who is this talking about? We'll see in the Gemara. But my father lost an object, my Rebbe lost an object. I spend the time returning my Rebbe's object first. Why? My father, I owe him unbridled hakaras hatov. Why? Because he brought me into this world. But my Rebbe is responsible for bringing me to the world to come. Vim aviv chacham shel aviv kodemes. Now, if my father is a Talmid Chacham, then ultimately, again, then my father takes precedence, because Rabbi said the assumption is that what? That my father is both my Rebbe and my father. And my father. It's interesting about say the way the Gemara phrases it is if my father is a chacham. It says over here. Yeah, so right, shakel can't shakel kineged Rebbe. All right, so there's a lot to discuss here. It doesn't say that my father taught me Torah. It just says that my father is a Talmid Chacham. But it's almost like the default assumption is if my father is a Talmid Chacham, my father certainly taught me Torah. In which case, my father is my father and my Rebbe. Incredible. Haya ave v'rabba no sin masui. We'll say if my father and my Rebbe are both carrying a burden, carrying merchandise, and they need help. I help my Rebbe first, and then I help my father. If my father and my Rebbe were both in captivity, I'll say very dramatic Gemara, right? You redeem your Rebbe first, and then you redeem your father. But if my father is a Talmid Chacham, so we'll say, so once again, you see that caveat. If my father is a Talmid Chacham, then ultimately, again, my father has the status of my father and my Rebbe, so I'll redeem my father first and then my Rebbe. We'll say, incredible. So let's analyze this. So we'll say, let's start. Now we'll say, the first thing we're starting with over here is the concept that if anyone else, right, if my monetary or my material concerns come before anyone else's, whether it's my father or it's my Rebbe. So where do we know this from? I'm Rav Yehuda Rav. So I'm Rav Yehuda Rav. Amar Kra Fs Ki lo yeh b'cha evyon. We'll say so this on Shabbos. The pasuk says only there will not be with you any paupers. Now we'll say that now the way the Gemara is actually in that pasuk is Fs lo yeh b'cha evyon. The idea over here is that there should be no poverty with you, b'cha, which means your financial concerns come before anyone else's financial concerns. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, again, I'm allowed to look for my object before anyone else's object. I'm allowed to say, that's why, again, I'm allowed to address my own losses before anyone else's losses. Shalcha kodem l'shel kol adam. I'll say my financial needs, my material needs, come before anyone else's. We'll say incredible Gemara. Listen to this. Va'amrav Yehuda Amarav kala mekayim ba'atzmo kach sof sof bali de kach. Gemara says, but if you actually live this way, you'll become impoverished. Listen, now what does this mean? This is an incredible Gemara. I'll say there are certain things that are mutter, but it doesn't mean you should do it. So is it mutter to always place your own financial needs first? Absolutely. Absolutely, it's mutter. Rabbi said, the Gemara says, but just know, if you actually live this way, this is a terrible way to live. An absolutely terrible way to live. Ultimately, again, a person who lives this way will become an evion, will ultimately become impoverished. And I will say, it may not mean materially impoverished. Right? It could be that you have all your money. I will say, but a person who lives life only looking out for himself, worrying about his own needs, always above everyone else's, such a person will absolutely unequivocally become an evion. Maybe not materially, but certainly spiritually, and certainly morally. You have every right to look out for your own needs first. But a person who lives that way, a person who lives a selfish life, even though it's a halachically sanctioned selfish life, I will say, that's not a life. It might be mutter, but it's absolutely unequivocally wrong, and you will become an evion. You will become poor. Again, maybe not materially, but absolutely morally and spiritually. Incredible Gemara. Hayu aviv v'rabo nosin masui. So we'll say again, if my father and my Rebbe were both carrying a load, so the obligation is to first go ahead and help out my Rebbe. So we'll say, so now obviously, the $1 million question in this is, what's the definition of a Rebbe? Who are we talking about over here? Rabu Sha'amru, Rabu Shalamdu Chachma. So we'll say, it's the Rebbe who taught me Chachma. Now we'll say, wisdom. Now we'll say, interesting, we're going to see what is wisdom? Gemara. Amazing. Gemara. Again, we're going to define that in just a little bit. V'lo Rabbi Shalom du Mikra u'Mishnah de'Remer. Remer says it's not the Rebbe who taught you Chumash, or who taught you, or Mikra merely means Tanakh. It's not the Rebbe who taught you Tanakh, or not the Rebbe who taught you Mishnah, but rather it's the Rebbe who taught you wisdom. Wisdom being Gemara. Gemara Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kol Shorov Chachmas Amenu. Rabbi Yehuda says it's the Rebbe who you got the majority of your knowledge from. That's who it is. Majority of your knowledge. We'll say whatever. So in other words, it's interesting because whereas Rabbi Meir looks at it from a subject perspective, right? Your Rebbe in life is the Rebbe who teaches you Gemara. How much Gemara you learn is almost irrelevant. The Rebbe from whom you learn Gemara, that is your Rebbe. Interesting enough, Rabbi Yehuda understands it more almost like as a quantitative idea. Who is the person from whom you've absorbed the majority of your knowledge? That is your Rebbe. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Afilu Oher Einav Ela Mishnah Achos Zehu Rabo. Rabbi Yossi says, Rebbe is incredible. Rebbe is anyone whom you learned any amount of knowledge from. So I will say, it's also interesting, right? Because according to Rabbi Meir, you have one Rebbe, right? That's the Rebbe who teaches you Gemara. Rabbi Huda, one Rebbe. The Rebbe from whom you got the majority of your knowledge. Rabbi Yossi, multiple Rebbeim. Pretty much anyone who's ever taught you any knowledge, ultimately again, is your Rebbe. Amar Rava, Kigon Rav Schora, Ta'azbaran Zuma Listerun. So we'll say, so Rava gives an example of this. He gives an example of Rav Schora. Rav Schora will say, taught them about Zuhara Listerun. So we'll say, this is in Seder Taras. They were learning about a particular utensil. No one knew what the utensil was. And Rav Schora was the one who said that this concept, Zuma Listerun, is a spoon that you use to remove froth from a pot of soup or from a pot of food. Shmuel Karamane Ale, Haumir Abanan, the Asbere Echad Yorei La'amas Ashechi, Ve'achar Posech. Shmuel tore Kriya. When the Talmid Chacham would taught will say, again, there's a Mishnah Maseches Tamid that talks about how the Kohanim would open up the door. One of the doors, Rabbi say, had to be opened up from the inside. So what they would do is that one of the Kohanim would insert his arm up until the armpit, and then would open the door from the inside of the door. So again, there was a particular time to explain this to Shmuel, and ultimately Shmuel went ahead and Shmuel tore Kriya when he passed away. So the Gemara says, Amar Ula, Talmidei Chacham Sheva Bavel, Omdim Zeh Mipnei Zeh. Talmidei Chacham in Bavel stand up for each other. V'korin Zeh al Zeh. And ultimately they tear Kriya for one another when they pass away. When they pass away, so this is incredible. So in Bavel, as much as the Talmidei Chachamim give kavod to one another, right? They go ahead and they stand up for each other. They tear kriya for one another. But when it comes to a lost object and there's a conflict between a Rebbe and the father, they define Rebbe as Rabbo Muvhak, as primary Rebbe. Now, I will say, even in that, I just want to point out, what is the definition of Rabbi Muvhak? Is Rabbi Muvhak like Rabbi Meir, the person who teaches you Gemara? Or is it like Rabbi Yehuda? Ultimately, again, the person from whom you've acquired the majority of your knowledge. So those are going to be the two primary definitions in Rabbi Muvhak. The Kabbai Mini Rav Chisda Mi Rav Huna, Talmid V'tzarech Lo, Rabbi Meir, both say an incredible Gemara over here. So it comes along Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda asks from Rav Huna, right? Rav Chisda, Rav Huna. What happens if there's a Talmud, but the Rebbe needs the Talmud? Now let's say, now what does this mean? This is actually a very profound idea. If you look at Rashi says over here, 3 lines down in the wide lines of Rashi. So ultimately, again, you have a Rebbe, but the Rebbe leans very heavily on a Talmud, either for past teachings or for teachings of other opinions. So Rabbi say, what is the status of that Rebbe for this Talmud? Is that still considered to be like is the Rebbe still considered to be the Rabbi Mufak or not? So we'll say Amalei. So this is incredible. Rabbi will say. So Rav Chisda asked this question to Rav Huna. Now Rav Chisda was Rav Huna's. Rav Huna was Rav Chisda's Rebbe. Rav Chisda asked this of Rav Huna, and Rav Huna got offended, because Rav Huna thought that Rav Chisda was talking about himself, and that Rav Chisda was inferring that Rav Huna needs Rav Chisda. So Amar le Chisda lo tzarich nalach. So Rav Huna says, Chisda, I want to be clear. I don't need you. At tzrichas li ad arba'in shnin. But you need me for another 40 years. So ikbidi hadadi. So both say they got angry at each other. Follow aili legabe hadadi, and they stopped visiting one another. That was incredible. So the Gemara says, Yosef Rav Chisda arba'in tanisim mishum dechalash daitei di Rav Huna. Rav Chisda fasted 40 fast days because he upset Rav Huna. Yosef Rav Huna arba'in tanisim mishum dechash Rav Chisda. And Rav Huna fasted 40 fast days because he was choshe, because he suspected Rav Huna of being, because he suspected Rav Chisda of being disrespectful. So we'll say, now what's tragic in this story, I will say, is, did they reconcile? Did they reconcile? Because the Gemara just says they did not visit each other. So did they reconcile? Didn't they reconcile? So the Gemara doesn't seem to indicate that. And I'll say, there's something even more important than fasting when you wrong someone. What's more important than fasting when you wrong someone? Reconcile. Apologize. Own it and move forward. I say, so often in life, we hurt someone, we offend someone, and kind of like we feel bad initially, then we justify, then we dig in, and then like we feel like in principle, I'm not going to go ahead and apologize. I will say, there is nothing worse for Klal Yisrael than machlokes, and on the flip side, there is nothing better for Klal Yisrael than reconciliation. The ability to go ahead and just say, I'm sorry. The ability to go ahead and we all make mistakes, but to make amends, I will say the greatest personal schus, and also the greatest schus for our people. So halacha like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says the definition of a Rebbe is the person from whom you've learned the majority of your wisdom. That's what we call Rabbi Mufak, a Rebbe Mufak. That's where I've learned the majority of my wisdom from. So the Gemara says, Rav Acha bar Rav Huna, Amar Rav Sheshes, halacha Rabbi Yossi. He also the halacha like Rabbi Yossi. I will say Rabbi Yossi says that your Rebbe, not Rabbi Mufak, but your Rebbe is anyone who you learned anything from. He says even a Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan really say this. Rabbi Yochanan, halacha kistam mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan said halacha is like kistam mishnah. Utanan Rabo Shalom do Chachma. And the Mishnah said, Rabbi say, who is my Rebbe? That's the person who taught me Chachma. And what's Chachma? My Chachma, Rov Chachmaso, the majority of my wisdom. Rabbi say, which sounds like ultimately again Rabbi Yehuda. What's the definition of Rabba Mufak? Now, again, remember, Rabba Mufak in this context means this is the person who essentially I'm going to put on a pedestal even above my father. Above my father. That's the Rebbe who taught me the majority of the Torah that I know. Majority of the Torah that I know. Tana. So pretty much what comes out over here is we're left really with two primary opinions. That what's my Rabba Mufak? Either the person who taught me the majority of the knowledge that I have, or the person who teaches me Gemara. So those seem to be the two opinions that are winning out from amongst the spectrum of opinions over here. So just keep those two in mind. Tarabanan. Ha'oskin b'mikra mida ve'eno mida. So let's listen to this. People who learn mikra, Tanakh, it's good, but it's not so good. It's not so good. Now we'll say now, we'll look at Rashi this moment. Mida, Rashi says over here, hiktsas. So obviously learning Tanakh is good. Ve'ina mida, Rashi says, Shamishna Gemara yafim mimena, mipnei shetluyin begirsa u'mishtachin shebiyimeim lohaya Gemara b'ksav. So let's listen to this. On one hand, learning Tanakh is good. I will say, but there's a problem. What's the problem with just getting focused on Tanakh? So this is going to sound a bit strange, but Tanakh doesn't teach me what to do. I need halacha. Without halacha, you can't be a Jew. Without halacha, you don't know what to do. Right? So on one hand, learning Tanakh is good. But lamaisa, there's also don't get too caught up in the learning of Tanakh. So the Gemara says, Mida ve'ena mida. B'mishnah, mida v'not schar. So also, obviously, if you learn Mishnah, it's good, and you get schar for it. Gemara, ein lecha mida gidola mizu. Both say there is nothing better than learning Gemara. I don't even need anyone to tell us this, right? We live this every single day. There is nothing better than sitting down to a blat of Gemara. Ula olam haviratz lemishnah yosem min Gemara. But I will say, but always run to learn Mishnah more than Gemara. Gemara says, okay, that made no sense. Ha gufa kashya. Amrit bi Gemara ein lechamid. I say, now by the way, before we resolve this, I just want to understand, why does the Gemara say there's nothing better than Gemara? Because I will say, understand. Okay, we learn at a little bit of a quicker pace, but Lamaisa, again, remember, everything is in Gemara. As Chazal tell us, hafach ba v'hafach ba dekula ba. Everything is in here. Everything is in here. Right? Mikra, Tanakh is in here. Mishnah's in here. Analysis is in here. Halacha is in here. Hashkafa is in here. Musar is in here. Gemara represents one-stop shopping. Everything is here. That's why Chazal said there is nothing greater than Gemara. So the Gemara says, but now I have a problem. Hago fakasha. Amrit bi Gemara ein lechamid gidol mizo. You told me there's nothing better than Gemara. V'hada amrat uli olam haviratz lemishnah yosem min Gemara. And then you told me run to Mishnah more than Gemara. So which one is it? Should I do Mishnah? Should I do Gemara? So it's an incredible Gemara over here. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, Amar Beis. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Bimei Rabbi Nishnas Mishnah zu. Wow. Rabbi say this was said in the days of Rebbe. What happened in the days of Rebbe? Kula, so the Gemara says, Kula alma masnis, Shafko kula alma masnisin, va'azlu basar Gemara. Rabbi say, listen to this. In the days of Rebbe, Rabbi say, just to point out, Rebbe, just to give you context, Rabbi say, Rebbe was born about 135 CE, right? So about 60 years after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. So it's important, so that's when he's born. So it's important just to give a little bit of historical context, because as we're going to see actually, and again, we'll see what we have time for today, but Rashi gives us a whole history lesson over here, which is incredibly important. So we'll say, in the days of Rebbe, they said this. What happened in the days of Rebbe? Was in the days of Rebbe, they were Mesadr the Gemara. They established the Gemara. When they established the Gemara, there was incredible excitement about Gemara. And I will say, here's what's interesting. We find Gemara sometimes very confusing and doesn't necessarily give us like a clear pathway to halacha. So I'll say, can you imagine what learning looked like before Gemara? Right? Before Gemara, how confusing things were. So when Gemara came, there was an incredible excitement about Gemara. Everyone ran to Gemara. What did? They forgot about Mishnah. They forgot about Mishnah. So therefore, Rebbe taught, run to Mishnah more than Gemara. So Rebbe was concerned that Mishnah was being forgotten, and therefore halacha l'maaseh, he went ahead and he taught, go ahead and learn Mishnah. I will say, take a look at the top Rashi on Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, an incredible Rashi. Bimei Rebbe Nishnas Mishnah Zu. Rashi says, Hadik Tani Gemara ein lechamid gidol mizo lefi shemishirabu tamidei Shammai vehilal shahayu lefanav shlosha doros rabu machlokes batorah. Rabbi say, now watch this. Before, this is very important. Machlokes in Klal Yisrael. I don't mean like fighting. I mean machlokes in halacha began with the students of Hillel and Shammai. Not Hillel and Shammai themselves. Hillel and Shammai only had very few defined machlokesim. There was a proliferation of machlokes by the students of Hillel and Shammai. And in fact, the Gemara says, Na'asu kishtei toros. It's almost as if there was a Torah of Shammai and a Torah of Hillel, to the point by Rabbi say that the students of Shammai would not marry into the families of the students of Hillel, and vice versa, because each one thought the other were genealogically unfit based on just their interpretations. So Rabbi say, when there are two Torahs in Klal Yisrael, this is an existential threat to the continuity of Klal Yisrael. So watch this. What happens? Now, why did all this happen? Mitoch all shibur malchios ugzeros she'gozun alein. Umitoch kach lo hayicholin lasei slave levar divrei acholkim ad yamav shel Rebbe. So we'll say, now watch this. Now, the Gemara, Rashi says, all of this is a result of persecution. There was so much persecution. That's why, again, historically, it's important to understand when all of this is happening. There's so much persecution. This is the time, this is the era before the destruction of the Second Beis HaMikdash, the destruction of the Second Beis HaMikdash. There's so much persecution. So because there's so much persecution, there's not clarity of mind to establish halacha. So therefore, I will say, again, literally, it was like there are two different Torahs. Until the days of Rebbe. Comes Rabbi Yehuda in the days of Rebbe, Shanasana Kadosh Baruch Hu lo Chein Be'ene Antoninos Melech Romi. Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, Rebbe, had a special relationship with the Caesar Antoninus, as Kidarmina Ba'avodah Zara, V'nochu Mitzara, V'shalach V'kibeis Kol Tamidi Eretz Yisrael, V'ad Yamav Lo Hayu Mesechtos Turos. So we'll say, listen to this. So during the days of Rebbe, because he had a good relationship with the Caesar, there was a little bit of a respite from persecution. What did Rebbe do with the respite from persecution? He gathered all the Talmidei Chachamim of Eretz Yisrael. And he said, guys, he probably didn't say guys, but he said, Chevra, we have to get organized. We have to get organized. So what did he do? So he says, Ad yamav lo hayu mesechtos turos. Until the days of Rabbi said they were not organized mesechtos like we have them. Rather, elakol talmid sheshama davar mepi gadol himenu garsa v'nasnis simanam halacha plonus uplonus shamati misham uploni ushkeneskabtu amar kol echad masha shama v'nasnu levar tamei machlokes divrei miru uyin lekayim v'sidru hamasechtos. Rabbi said this is incredible. So what happened? Rabbi said there were no organized mesechtos. So what happened? Talmidei Chachamim, this one knew these halachas, this one knew these halachas. Rebbe gathered everyone. And Rebbe said, okay, everyone share what you know. Everyone share what you know. Everyone shared their information. And Rebbe organized all of the halachos into mesechtos. He organized everything into tractates, into orders. The Sidra Masechtos, Divrei Nezikin Levadam, Divrei Yevamas Levadam, Divrei Kodshim Levadam, Ustam Nami B'Mishnah Divrei Yichidim. So we'll say Rebbe organized the Mishnah. Rebbe organized all of the halach as everything we have today. The order that we have today, all the different orders, Rebbe did that. Rebbe did that. He goes on, he says, Shera Rebbe, and Rebbe says sometimes Rebbe put a halacha statement in the Mishnah without attribution. Now, why does Rebbe make a statement? Why did Rebbe put a statement in the Mishnah without attribution? To show you that what? To show you that it was authoritative. It was absolutely authoritative. He goes on, he says, so I'll say, now watch this. So Rebbe is the one who organized the Mishnah and the Gemara as we have it in tractates as we have it. So Rebbe says, so what happens? So Rebbe organizes. So Rebbe say, by the way, I just want to point out, Rebbe did this. Rebbe say this goes back to what we learned on Shabbos morning together, the Medrash that says, Ish Yehudi, Al Tikri Yehudi, El Yechidi. I was spoken the Shabbos morning. El Yechidi. I was saying, great things do not happen through collaborative group endeavors. Great things happen because of the courage of individuals who then get the group involved afterwards. Now let's say, Rebbe, Rebbe did this. Rebbe did this. Rebbe did this. Now, truth is, we'll say we're going to have. What we're going to do is we're going to do a shir on this. This we're really going to do a shir on, right? Because we'll say there's a lot of history involved in this. Also, like a lot of Jewish history in this about Rebbe, Antoninus, what's happening all around over here. But again, I will say this is it. So therefore, the Gemara says there is nothing greater than Gemara because Gemara has everything. It has the organized Mishnayos, it has the organized topics, and it also has all the organized reasoning. But I will say, but then what happened? What happened? When people started learning Gemara, they had forsaken the study of Mishnah. So then Chazal said, okay, let's swing the pendulum back. We can't allow Mishnah to be forgotten, so let's go back and learn Mishnah as well. We'll say, okay, we're almost out of time. We'll say, I just want to point out there's a tremendous Musar Haskell on this. The tremendous Musar Haskell in this, we'll say, is that the beauty of Yiddishkeit, on one hand, the strength of Yiddishkeit is that it's immutable. Right? The Taryag mitzvos are the Taryag mitzvos. That is it. That is it. There's not a 6/14th, there's not a 6/12th, right? There's not, this one no longer applies, this one does apply. Mitzvos are mitzvos are mitzvos, Shulchan Aruch is Shulchan Aruch. That being said, an approach to learning, an approach to Yiddishkeit, so I both say that does change with the times. And part of the beauty of us as a people is the ability to adapt to the times, is the ability to recognize that maybe what once worked once upon a time may not work now. So again, once upon a time, Gemara. Then what happened? Mishnah was being forgotten. Okay, guys, Chavra, let's swing the pendulum back. Let's go to Mishnah. And then I both say, where does the pendulum end? It ends off somewhere in the middle. So we'll stop over here for today. I promised you incredible. I promised you incredible. I will say, and again, we didn't even get to everything today. And I will say tomorrow we're going to start at 3:30 in the morning. We will be. I will say shkoyach. What a way to start the week. Oh, we started already yesterday. I will say tremendous shkoyach, everyone. All right, Chavra Zoom.